Okay, so I'm hoping that you can see the
Yes,
screen
perfect.
correctly. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is what non-fungible tokens, NFTs, should have been about and what they're meant to be in the first place. Now, the way I'll put this very simply is I've got a number of patents and other papers on this topic, and they're totally screwed up. Now, just to give you an example, this is current NFT sort of world. This is something ridiculous. It's crappy pseudo art that is being sold for a lot of money, mainly for money laundering, so that people can believe that they don't pay tax and can basically mix their funds. That's really the only purpose of those sort of things. I don't care what people say. There's no real value in a stupid rehashed version of a lion that you own the hash to, but have no other rights to. And this is the problem. You don't own any rights to any of this. People seem to actually believe that they own something when they own an NFT of the current sort of implementation. So first of all, we're going to have to actually look at what we're doing with NFTs, what the misuse is, and what the potential use cases are. So I put out a patent in 2016, way before any of this current craze. And that's finally been granted last year. But the whole item that people are overlooking is low cost. It's not about how do I sell crappy artwork for hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions or anything like this. That really is misusing everything here. So what we need to think about is what the uses are. So first of all, we have a metadata descriptor. It's something that allows this asset to be individualized. Now, right now, we have people failing to understand that they can actually own and control all of this, even if you're talking about artwork. In the same way that Snapchat, when implemented correctly, and other applications can lock you into only seeing images on their platform, artwork could be locked into only display on certain platforms. Now, with a variety of decompression, compression, and reduction techniques, we could allow thumbnails to be presented, but not the full image. That would then give you the proper item of a bit of artwork, a digital file. For instance, if you have an NFL file, you could then start selling it, renting it, and having people view it, but in a controlled manner. It's the promise of full digital rights management, none of which is being incorporated into what you see on Ethereum NFTs at the present time. So you need something that is truly ownable. Now, if I can bring up an image, as I can here, and this image is effectively the complete image, I don't own it. I can do this copy image, save. Guess what? There's no ownership in that. What the hell is this for technology? It is, oh, you own a little piece of something that you can trade that has no real reference that I can put on a different blockchain and someone else can sell the same damn thing. So what? I mean, transferable. We need to make this truly transferable. Now, that doesn't mean that you think that you own it. It means you truly own it. You own everything to do with it. The rights to it, the display rights, the ability to have someone rent it, to use it, to put it on a platform for a week, to take it down, to have a broadcast or syndication to 1,000 people, to earn per second watched, to earn for every time someone puts it up on their wall. If you're not doing that, you're not really deploying an NFT. So NFTs should be indivisible. There should not be any smaller denominations. There shouldn't be the ability for someone to right click and put it up there on Twitter. If you're doing that, you don't really have an NFT. You've got a hash on some distributed ledger, that's it. So they are a unique cryptographically secured tokens that cannot be replicated. So think about that for a moment. What we're talking about is something completely different to this. Now, The current image here, some people have analyzed, and there is a lot of evidence that the original seller and the final seller happen to be the same person, at least in part of this, which means that there's a whole lot of pump and dump type scams, because right now we have no identity or anything else put in, which we should have. Under the current legislation in Europe, Britain, and America, the American one's just been introduced, which people don't seem to realize that cryptographic systems are no different to anything else. The existing legislation applies. Bitcoin was always something that is enforceable under law. It's not the cypherpunk wet dream of anything. It's not encrypted. There's no encryption in Bitcoin. It shouldn't be called crypto. So the reality here is, this is not ownership. It's not IP rights. Someone has just transferred money from one wallet to another wallet. Why? So that they have a new wallet. So they're paid for entry on a ledger. Does that really matter? We're looking at the concept of, I can move this from a pseudonym to a pseudonym and say identity doesn't matter. But if you look at my original white paper, identity does matter. Now, when I released the white paper, I said identity is firewalled. That doesn't mean that there's no identity in any of this. It means that identity is a separated function. It means identity is still there, but you can not have it put out there for everyone to see. The description I used was something like a stock market ticker tape. So in a stock market ticker tape, every share that's ever sold is recorded. Every identity of every owner is recorded. It's been quite some time before bearer shares were allowed in the United States. And the simple fact of the matter here is that means that everyone who buys and sells shares, even though it's not public, has an identity. So we need to start thinking about all of that, because it's very, very simple to do in any blockchain-based system. And purchasing the NFT does not mean by default that you have any rights at all. It doesn't mean that you have any intellectual property. So if you don't have intellectual property, what are you really buying? If you're buying a string of numbers that give you no ability to resell something, that everyone and their dog can put up this ugly picture. Ironically, this ugly picture here that I'm reusing, I can, and no one can even pull me up for copyright or anything else. I mean, it's totally asinine and insane. If I actually have a normal artwork on paper, I will have copyright by default. So it's a system that is actually reducing the amount of rights that the artist has. So we need to put in copy protection. We need to have a guarantee of availability. The current implementations on things like IPFS and other systems at the moment are not guaranteed. The majority of, I mean, I would say probably 99 to 99.5% of all of these NFTs are sitting on a single machine in someone's basement. That's not really a way of having something robust. The nature of what blockchains meant to do is to have a distributed, robust system. And that's what decentralization is about. So we haven't realized the potential at all. And there is a lot of potential. So if we think about it, we have traceability, the ability to find out who bought and sold something, to have all of the money laundering, AML provisions built in. We have cost reduction. We can make this cheaper, easier. We can have the entire very expensive money laundering process reduced from sometimes thousands of dollars into cents or less. We can have proof of authenticity. We can actually go in there and prove that someone has the real item, that they have sold it correctly, and that all of the details are incorporated. And that goes more than these Bebo images. So I'm going to give you 4 use cases. When I first brought this out, I wasn't thinking about some of these silly things linked. My original papers were about high value goods, access control, tickets, vouchers, and shipping documents. So if we start on this and we look at the first one, we look at high value goods. Take, for instance, your typical Veblen good, high-end handbags for women. Now, there is a big market in both complete fakes, but also knockoffs that are made by the manufacturer. For instance, there are a number of Chinese manufacturers for some of the high-end cosmetic brands, handbags, etc., who will go out there and they're given a run of 5,000, but they make 10,000. And what they do is they sell exactly the same product, but it's not official. And that means that the person buying it is in fact being ripped off, but it seems that this counterfeit good is as good as the real one. Now, that has an impact for a number of industries. If we look at watches, for instance, very easy to implement. Right at the moment, if you look at a Rolex, it is verifiable. I have a few, and I can tell you what they do is they have a serial number that you can actually trace and check. But the process of going out there, looking at the bezel, taking down the number, putting it into a really obscure website, trying to find out whether this is real or not, etc., is difficult. And even then, some of the numbers are resold. So because it doesn't necessarily put your name there, you can't always find that out. But what we can do is we can embed information in products. So high-end goods and a lot of these manufacturers who are suffering from counterfeit goods would benefit from having a very simple token system that could even be automated with RFID and other near-field technologies to allow the customer now to have a complete proof of ownership that could be linked to apps that could prove the property of goods. Now, I said this to a friend of mine's wife who has a number of fake handbags. I won't name anyone, but her comment was, "Oh God, that would be horrible." And I said, "Why?" Because half my bags are fake. Now, that's the whole point though. Anyone who has a real handbag will now be able to prove that they have a real handbag. So those who have fake ones, well, I'm sorry, but you're not helping the original manufacturer or anything like that, so I don't really care. Proof of ownership. Next, if it gets lost, imagine that your expensive watch, handbag, shoes, etc. is lost. What if it's stolen? Now, we have a methodology that enables the owner to actually transfer to the insurance company, get their compensation, provably say this is no longer theirs. And if it turns out that it's not really lost and it comes up, they can actually reverse all of that. And equally at the same time, it can be made illegal to possess. In France, for instance, the possession of counterfeit handbags, clothing, etc., is actually a criminal offense now. So you can be pulled up at airports, and if you have a fake Louis Vuitton, they will seize it. So it could actually be illegal to possess stolen goods. So tokens now allow your owner of a good to find where the product is, or at least devalue theft. So if an item gets resold, the NFT owner can always trace and prove their ownership. They can easily transfer to a new owner validly, and their proof of ownership means that there's no real way of ever stealing some item and having the full value. So if you steal a Rolex, then someone would have to melt it down. But to tell you the truth, the value of gold in the average $20,000 to $30,000 Rolex is probably $500. They're not that heavy. The workmanship and the brand are what costs. So you're paying more than $20,000 for the brand, and if someone steals it, they get very little. Now, that makes it very much something that is going to protect people who have goods. And this can go down in value as well. As we implement this, it can go down into average goods and other things such as vehicles, jewelry, and other property. The inscription with lasers of diamonds, rubies, and other such items right now would allow for these to be registered immediately. property sales could be made cheaper. This could extend into a lot of third world countries as well. So we would be able to take areas such as the slums in Mumbai and basically allow people to capture proof of ownership. And over time, there is homesteading rights. So there are people that are in these slums in Mumbai who've lived there for 20 years, which would mean that they would have rights over time to their property to be able to do the plan that DeSoto did to actually give the ability for people to own property. Over time, that becomes something that is natural. So if we can prove property on a blockchain, say I have been living here continuously for 12 years, then I end up owning something. Right here in London, for instance, there was a case a number of years, about a decade ago, where a homeless man ended up being bought out by the government for around £20 million because it turned out that he had been camping in the same spot in Hyde Park for 20 years. And a very smart lawyer came up to him and did a deal. And you have rights to property if you've been living there for a long time. So they put a claim for Hyde Park and the government settled with him for £20 million. And he's now a very rich homeless person who is no longer homeless. We can extend that to vehicles. So for instance, giving access to your car, allowing people to have access when you want it parked, for when it's being serviced. All of the ability to trace the history of your vehicle can be stored on a blockchain. Every time you get it serviced is now provably saved. No logbook to keep. All of that can be automated completely. So rather than having people have tax logbooks whenever they fill up the car or anything, this could be actually part of the entire process, completely recorded, completely saved, and able to be stored forever. So access and control is my next area. Room access, nice and simple. So to swipe into the building here, I've got a card. I have to do that multiple times. Unfortunately, if I want to go between levels in my office, I have to do that all over the place. And we can give different access controls to different employees. We can incorporate all of this into devices that allow different times. So when I was talking about scripting ability and the ability to do anything you want in the early days of Bitcoin, this is the sort of thing I actually meant. We can now have a tamper-proof ledger. No one can delete those entries. The logs, first thing any hacker does, any thief does, is try and delete logs. With a blockchain, you can't. So a lot of people in the cypherpunk world hate this, and they will try and cover up what you can do with Bitcoin because, well, access control's horrible for them. Starting your car, you can enable temporary control. Accessing computers remotely. If you want to get onto a system, we can integrate with things like Kerberos. That would enable someone to have a better form of something like Microsoft Authenticator that records when you log in, how long you log in, would enable setting up timeframes, access that you can remotely give someone, the ability to securely log in without worrying from an airport computer at a terminal, things that you're told not to do anymore because it's no longer safe. We can fix that. So we can give building access, vehicle access, device access. And device access can extend to IoT and IIoT, industrial Internet of Things, estimated in the next 5 years to be 30 billion machines. So that is 30 billion very small sales continuously that everyone goes, oh, but there's no money in it. But think about that for a moment. Imagine a machine accessing at 1,000th of a cent a time, 10,000 times a day, and then you multiply that by 30 billion of those. So yes, that's only 10 cents a day for 30 billion machines. Think about the size of the economy that I'm actually talking about. So I'm not talking about these wanky little things like Bebo pictures. I'm talking about things that will end up in trillions of dollars. And yes, they're small. That's the whole thing. Coke is small too. Coke makes about 0.5 cent per can, and they're a damn big company. So tickets and vouchers. We can offer static tickets. We can have event attendance. that allows people at the event company to actually control what's happening with their event ticket. So that could be a cinema, theater, anything you want really. And this means that the owner actually now has complete control. So it's not going to be popular with the scalpers of the world, unfortunately, because it means that the transfer can be limited. So you can actually have the original sort of event owner reissue. You can not be allowed to resell unless it's done correctly. Now, if you think about a concert provider, well, one of the things many of them don't like is the whole scalping industry, because what happens is a lot of people go out there and they buy up tickets very quickly and then they sell them for more than the value. And the artist doesn't get any money out of that. And some guy who's gone and bought 1,000 tickets gets the money. Now, I don't really care whether you think that's fair or not. I think it's fair that the creator, the owner, the artist, the musician, they have the right to decide how people buy their tickets. Very simple. And that's what I want to hand back to them. I want to take away the power from the people who scalp tickets and allow people to actually control what happens. Whether they auction it themselves, whether they have other means, easy. So with an NFT, we can allow transfer with set rules. Resell so that the event company and the artist makes money. And the real owner can always be listed against something. So the ticket holder can redeem at any time, they can return, all of this can be built in, and flexibility can be built in as a contractual set of terms without worrying about government rules. We don't need to have all these big bad government rules saying scalpers are bad and we're going to send police around, because there's no need anymore. We just remove the whole necessity for government to control any of this. So we want to give the ticket issuer ownership and control. And by doing that, we create a system where the ticket is now in the hand of the artist once again. So we can do that for parking tickets. When you want to park somewhere, you can pre-buy parking, you can do event tickets, vouchers. Someone can make a Groupon system once again, allowing traceability, authenticity, and the main thing here is low operational costs. Implemented correctly, we should be able to do this for around 1,000th of a cent. Now, that's not a lot of money, and that's not something that even at scale, any ticket provider is going to care too much about. Now, the next one is one that most people don't think about, but is very important. So exporting and shipping, importer, exporter, etc. It's an area I've done a lot of work in. Part of my my studies in when I did my MSc on banking and my my LLM in international commercial law, all evolved around EDI and bills of exchange. So it allows all of the shipping instructions, packing lists, certificate of origin, bill of lading, everything to be handled perfectly. Now, to give you an idea of how silly things still are, I remember a case only a few years ago where a large ship ended up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees, because what happened when they landed in Mumbai, someone had to go back into town, get a silly little stamp put on the piece of paper, run back, and meanwhile, 8 hours later, the ship was at the dock the whole time, unloaded. Instead of earning money or letting other people into the dock, everything got held up. That can be reduced. So shipping documents seem boring, but it is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is stuck in the 50s. So we can have different state options, like effectively a deterministic finite state automata. The shipping instructions, packing lists, origin, etc., can all be listed there. It's creation date, as it's replaced, edited, endorsed, completed, cancelled, the works. Everything here that we imagine sort of should be part of smart contracts can be done right now. So very simply, when we see NFTs and we see all this craze about how much I can sell Bebo for, I find that completely boring, because my idea is if I can get something like British Rail and Transport to start using this sort of thing, then if we sold it at 1/10 of a cent per ticket to them, that would make about 12 to 15 million pounds a year, just on train tickets for 1/10 of a cent each. It's called volume. So what I'm going to try and get you to understand is NFTs are not about silly little images. They should be about building something that actually changes the world. Thank you, and questions.
Yes, thanks, Greg. Hands up, everyone, for Greg. Thank you so much for the presentation, Greg. I think it was very, very interesting. I like how you try to point us towards actual real-life applications instead of what currently is kind of the biggest hype is around owning images. Yeah, now we're going to have a Q&A. Guys, you can post any of your questions in the chat, but I'm going to start with my questions first. Greg, in the beginning, you said how we're still far away from real-life application, real-life impact when it comes to NFTs, right? What do you think it takes to get from the current stage to what you're imagining NFTs to be? Do you think it requires a lot of legislation in the first place? Because the actual real-life impact, there needs to require some legislation there. What is your kind of idea and perspective on what still needs to happen for real-life impact of NFTs still to occur and actually be there?
Okay, I don't think any legislation needs to exist at all. The entire framework of Bitcoin, if implemented correctly, falls within law as it stands within Britain, Europe, and or most of Europe anyway. I don't know all of the laws there, and United States, Canada, Australia. So there's nothing new in any of this industry. People seem to not realize that over 25 years ago, there were already digital tokens, proper cryptocurrency. Bitcoin's not. So legally, there's nothing needed. People don't seem to understand that the functioning of Bitcoin and other systems is completely within sort of legal frameworks. What you do need to start realizing, though, is scale is important. So the work that my team has been doing in what we call TerraNode and things like that is critical. When I talk about these things, we need to understand that this idea of I can get 1,000 transactions a second is complete bullshit. What we should be aiming for is I can get 100 billion transactions a second. And if it's anything less than 100 billion, go home. So I'm not there yet. We're not there yet. I mean, even when we release TerraNode as a distributed system, we'll probably be about 1/10 of that. So we'll get to about 10 billion transactions a second over time. That will be scalable and we'll get there, but I mean, there's a lot of time and effort in all this. So that's what people don't seem to realize, that the game is not sitting there and making 100,000 different blockchains or tokens or images. It's about building an infrastructure that is going to be globally deployed.
Yeah, I think infrastructure indeed is very, very key here. Cool. Thanks for the answer there. Let me kind of start going through the questions that we have now in the chat, and we'll go through them one by one. Okay, so one question by, I'm reading them as I go. One question by Mohammed, for example. Everyone is jumping into NFTs now because they can flip, and it's all about these different kind of images. How can an average person jump on the NFT train, or kind of on this trend, and actually make a business out of it? Do you think that? Yeah.
Okay, that's very simple. Forget about the images and the speculation. Unless your big speculation's not an industry, it's too volatile, too risky. It's gambling. And I'm saying this as someone who helped set up the first licensed casino on the internet in the world, which was Lassiter's back in 1998. So, and one of my best friends is Calvin Ayre, who also still runs Bodog, which is gambling. And I've been involved with Centerbet, Sporting Bet. And so I've got a long history in gambling. I'll not say I don't, but the difference is I will tell you very categorically, it's good to be the house. If you're not the house, you're wasting your time and effort. Now, What you should be doing is looking at how you could use this to actually make money, not by speculating on the token itself, but by volume and taking small amounts. I'm a very traditional evil capitalist, and I believe in pushing down value for the consumer and making everything more and more attractive to users and consumers, and creating plumbing and applications that will make everything cheaper. So build an application such as a bus ticket system that is cheaper than the paper systems that anyone uses now. A theater ticket system that is better than those horrible things that they give you on QR codes right now. Give something that will do better than DocuSign and Adobe Sign, leaving records that are immutable and easily verified, that allow witnessing. Build a real business. Don't aim as NFTs as the outcome. NFT is just a technology that will enable something else. So the thing is, you have this hammer, you have a tool. What you want to do with it is build a house. You don't want to run around building new hammers. So that would be my answer.
Nice metaphor. Yeah, I mean, I do see that kind of the current hype around NFTs kind of at least gave it the time and attention needed as a technology. Hopefully people can take that further and actually turn into these scalable businesses. Yeah. A question by, so thanks for the answer. A question by Seth. Based on the examples and use cases that you provided, Greg, could NFTs be extended to IDs, passports, vouchers for elections or governments? Yeah.
So passports and other such things are actually quite simple. Yes. It could also be used in a variety of ways. Some of the technologies myself and my team have been working on include zero-knowledge proofs and other such things to allow people to provably demonstrate something such as proof of age in a way that doesn't give away their full identity. So all of that is then built into this technology. For instance, right now, does someone need your home address when you're getting on a plane, for instance? It might be recorded and the government can follow it up, but the airline doesn't always need that. So why share more than is needed? Another area is health records. Most people don't understand, but up to 11, there was a study done about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, where it was demonstrated that around 1,100 people see your health records in an American hospital anytime you go in for a hospital, like an operation in the hospital. Now, that means there are a lot of people getting more information than is necessary. The anesthesiologist only needs selected information. The cleaner doesn't need anything more than how long you're staying. So we can break down this information into indivisible tokens representing the part of why you're there. Voting is a harder thing. So can you do voting tokens? Yes, but the problem is not the tokens. I was involved in a project in Australia for New South Wales Electoral Commission a number of years ago called iVote. And that covers about 1% of the population. It covers people who are in the military and deployed, and a number of people who are disabled or too old and can't get to polling stations. Now, the problem with widespread distribution of something like this is coercion and other such things. If you have people voting from home, how do you know that they haven't sold their vote or that they haven't been forced into voting a certain way? So you need to incorporate a lot more than just the token. So it's not impossible to do voting, but voting is a far more complex situation than most people realize. If you're talking about something like a corporate voting system, then yes, a club vote, something that doesn't matter as much as a national election, then definitely that could be done right now. But a complete voting system will fall to all of the problems that we see in all of the American elections right now or other ones, unless we build supporting infrastructure that extends way past blockchain.
Yeah, I like how you see it in regards to IDs and passports, where probably everyone has their own record, and then based on where you are and what you do, certain certain piece of that information scheme given to the person who needs it, because so that you don't provide financial or certain information that the receiving party doesn't necessarily need. I think it's very interesting. Elections, I think that's a long way to go, and so it's also a very, very sensitive topic, I believe. I think that really nicely fits into the next question actually that we're having. It goes into the ability of governments to regulate NFTs, because we briefly talked about, you said legislation is required, but countries, for example, in China, is really trying to regulate data and have citizen data within their own country. How can we, these kind of policies, and how can governments, would they be able to impact the implementation of NFTs? And do you see that as a danger in blockchain technology in general?
No, not at all. What people don't seem to understand is the whole decentralized sort of mantra that you hear right now is false. Bitcoin's not cryptographic in the nature that people think. There's no encryption in Bitcoin. It's not a cryptocurrency like eCash. Now, although it's not something that you can easily do for large-scale transactions, as will be demonstrated next year on, you can even recover Bitcoin. You don't need keys. All of this, your key, your Bitcoin stuff is false. Now, you can attribute keys correctly to identity. That can be recorded, managed. All of that can happen. Now, under existing AML laws, which, I mean, I've gone into this for a long time. I used to work when I was an auditor at BDO over a decade ago in this area. You have sort of a split level requirement. For small transactions, there's no identity required. If you go and buy coffee or something like this, there's no identity at all. On the other hand, if you go and you spend $50,000 on a new car, then there is identity required. Now, people don't realize that, but anytime you spend over a certain amount, there has to be an exchange of identity. Funny enough, I've gone out and had staff Christmas parties where I paid for in the past, and I actually have to give my identity on some of these. I mean, imagine if you've got over 50 people. I don't even know how many people we have in N-Chain anymore. It's hundreds. But you take them out, you pay for everything. If it's not on the corporate card and someone pays for it personally, which I've done in the past, and get reimbursed, and then you have to actually have identity even given to the restaurant. So most people don't realize that all of this happens in the real world right now. Exchanges will fall in line because exchanges without banking don't work. And here's the thing no one seems to think about. Everything relies on the internet. So to mention a friend of mine again, Kelvin Air. Kelvin sort of went round and did a Forbes piece a number of years ago where he flouted the Americans saying, "I'm not American, you can't get me." Unfortunately for Kelvin, the Americans own the .com database range. So what happened was they just took all his domains. Now, all these exchanges that run around going, "You can't touch me," they operate on the internet. The reality here is the Department of Justice can shut down everything like that. And by like that, I mean like that. If, for instance, Coinbase was not following orders and wasn't doing proper KYC, then Coinbase could be shut down tomorrow. It could actually be in under an hour. The emergency injunction power would allow the American government to basically shut them down in an hour. So the whole $100 and something million Coinbase Ponzi scheme there can disappear. This is why you see Binance suddenly playing nice. I've been saying this to them for years, and they've finally started listening because as part of my sort of work with University of Leicester, where I'm in the law department there, there's a lot of people, including judges, who are starting to finally understand that Bitcoin's really, really easy when it comes to breaking the law. It is really super simple to capture. People forget that in 2005 and 6, the Grokster and LimeWire cases happened in the US. There's a lot of argument right now going, we're decentralized, we're a bunch of developers. But the Supreme Court in America decided in 2005 under the Grokster case that anonymous developers are covered, they're under law. Peer-to-peer isn't outside of any of this, and the existing provisions mean that they're fiduciaries. So everyone's running around right at the moment going, but we're peer-to-peer, we're protected. I'm sorry, but the Supreme Court decided this 15 years ago. So it's not new.
Right. I mean, then it seems like the centralized nature of the internet is just a huge issue. So there will have to be some kind of changes in the future happening. Otherwise, it's, I mean, in the end, if the internet is controlled by the US, then that's not really will there be a change towards the decentralized internet at some point? I mean, it goes a little bit far off, but there will be kind of the logical conclusion there if that's a huge kind of like barrier to a real decentralized net.
No, not at all. It's how it works properly. This is how I designed it. You don't get around it. Now, the simple answer that people don't want to look at is this is important. Democracies don't work as mob rule. They fall into a demagoguery, a populist sort of mire. Plato even covered this back in the early days of sort of the Athenian democracy, which fell apart, by the way. So if you want a democracy, the way that the American founding fathers decided to make something that would work is they added a constitution and separation of powers. Now, if you want to have a system that works, you need law, you need order. You can't just say, we're decentralized, no one can do whatever. I'm sorry, but law applies, identity applies, rights apply. All of this happens. If you want to have a democratic system, a system where people have rights and rules actually matter, then you have to very simply have a system that works under existing law, court orders, criminal, etc. And my answer there is, if you don't like that and you're American, vote, change the rules, become a congressman. If you're British, become a member of parliament. I mean, if you're in one of these other countries that don't have any rights, I can't say much about it, but at least you won't have any say on how things get grabbed. I mean, North Korea will never have a say in what happens to Bitcoin. The Americans will.
Yeah, no, I kind of went a certain direction, but yeah, thanks for these answers. Now, kind of going back to our previous topic, actual topic for today in regards to NFTs. I think, who was it? Jacob asked the question in regards to a successful use case. What's one of your favorite current successful use case of NFTs right now? You've talked a lot about the current use cases that you don't like and the ones you like to see in the future, but what are the ones you currently like to see when it comes in particular to NFTs?
So right at the moment, we're working with a number of governments, including Tuvalu, Antigua, and just small ones right now, but there are some larger ones at the same time. We're working on creating a digital economy for them. So people mentioned passports, and our team's working on making a system so that the people in Tuvalu can have a digital passport, so that things like all of that can link in with access keys, and we'd like to make the Tuvalu people able to travel, get around, interact, park, buy vehicles, buy property completely electronically. And that's one of the use cases. We're still maybe 18 months away from that happening. We've been working on that for over 3 years now. But that's a very successful area. There's Unisot, who are working on the traceability of seafood. So they're doing bills of exchange and other ideas that I've been talking about. And as an example, here in Britain, where I now live, a number of years ago, and this food but not seafood, there were a number of issues with mad cow disease. Now, there was probably only one farm in the whole of Britain that was really the problem, but most of the cattle in England had to be culled. Now, that's a massive problem, and it comes because if you can't trace where the problem came from, which cattle went into the abattoir and which farm they originally came from, then you end up having to ruin everything. Now, in the future, with things like seafood and vegetables, and like vegetables from Germany that had cholera in the past, all of these things will be traced to the individual farm, the shipping containers, everything that could be possibly seen as a problem will be known. So if you ever get bad seafood, you will know it's because X happened. And you'll be able to look at the fact that this shipping container, the Internet of Things device that is monitoring the temperature, monitoring the containment, will say whether it was kept at the correct temperature the whole time. You'll have all of that information. So those sort of things are actually very important to me.
Yeah, I think these are very, very practical applications, and I think they actually can provide some real life value. But also actually another question from Bill, actually, he's asking about if you think of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we think of NFTs. Also, one of the reasons why NFTs are currently being sold for such a high value is because people can identify themselves with these images. I see that the real life impact might not be that high, but there's certainly some value when it comes to people and these NFTs they buy. So how do you see that? Do you see that that's not really applicable? Because at some point, if we have an online community, people want to have an identity, and that can be directly linked to NFTs. Do you think there's some kind of value there?
Not with what we have now. If you're talking about if you're talking about something like a custom skin in a game, then yes, that will have some value. So I mean, unfortunately, someone mentioned metaverse, which thank you, Facebook, for stealing MetaNet from us. That seems to be what I do. I create things and watch everyone else steal it, but Zuck's very good at that. As people make games, as they do other things like that, there will be a number of sort of enhancements, special items, etc., that all come as NFTs as well. In a gaming world, I mean, it used to be like World of Warcraft, that people would set up mining farms, not like Bitcoin mining, but mining for gold by playing the game in Korean, Chinese type workrooms, where people would pay to get gold from other players. So cash exchange for goods, weapons, items. And this would enable the exchange of sort of value from one party to another. Now, the game players didn't like it. They saw it, I mean, some players wouldn't like it, and the Origin Games hates it because it takes away some of the value, because people cheat and get all the items. Now, that will also change. Over time, you'll be able to track where all this is coming from. You'll have a complete way of not like the recent Pokemon problem, where people were digitally copying items and inserting them into the game, will go away, because an NFT version of one of these Pokemon items would mean it is utterly uncopyable without destroying the original. So, so you copy and lose. So, which is exactly what should happen.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're kind of going slowly but surely towards the end of the session. I'll come with a last question from my side as well. I mean, in the end, what we're doing, and for example, unpackAI, we are also looking at education. And we're also focusing in regards to how we can look at blockchain and NFTs to further empower education and actually provide more value here. We're looking at examples such as certifications, certifications, and actually being able to finalize a certain course and having certain scores, all of them being openly viewable and accessible. Do you see other use cases when it comes to education and in particular? Something that you could maybe share?
Right back from storing your degrees and your qualifications, which is a very good one. I mean, we're working with a number of universities at the moment to actually be able to do that properly. So that will enable very quick, instant checking. It will stop some of the degree mills that have fake qualifications. But on top of that, I'd like to see things like the results from like how people are going in the past to how they are now being maintained. I used to be heavily involved with an organization called SANS. SANS are a information security organization in the United States. And one of the ways they would test people, they would have like actual testing where red and blue team would try and break into each other in hacking sessions. And you would see how well people went against how well they defended. You would see all of the scores, how they do, so that people aren't just paper tigers. They haven't memorized the questions. It can be completely randomized, and you've got evidence of that they haven't cheated, and there's evidence of that. Especially in this COVID world where people are sitting at home and not being tested correctly anymore. It would be really good to have a methodology to know how much people know and be able to retest and vet employees and others.
Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, so a lot of other.
John, I would like to ask a quick question. Craig, if you don't mind, John, I would like to know. So we're also very passionate about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, for trying to figure out how we can enable token economy in activating the community. Do you see that play to earn business models or DAOs, sort of where you're engaging the community members, will also have a very wide adoption outside the game communities?
Well, so a DAO is well, you're really looking at a corporation with a different voting structure. That's where people are going wrong. They think it's something different than that. You own a token, you can sell a token, it allows you to vote on the operation of the business. So in doing that, that's no different to any other business. It still requires leadership, it still requires a vision and focus. The issue is how quickly you allow people to change the rules within the organization, etc. And that's not always a good thing. So it's not about saying I can flip my tokens very quickly. It's about being able to create something that is lasting. So decentralized autonomous organizations have a purpose, but again, they're being misused, like with the ICO craze, to just raise money quickly rather than look at the long term.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Craig, thanks so much for joining the session, and thanks for everyone who was involved in this amazing session. Yeah. Okay. So we are going to wrap it now, and let's, John, you can just finish the call.
Yeah. Well, Craig, if you have anything, if you want people to follow your socials or anything from your side that you would want to announce before we finalize the session, you have your last comment now as well. But I'm sure we all appreciate you being here and sharing your insights. I think it was a very interesting discussion. So thank you already for that. But yeah, I want to give you another a few seconds if you want to take them.
No problem. I can't let anyone follow my social because I'm fairly much off it. There are a couple of things, like LinkedIn's run by my company and my firm. I don't do it myself. Twitter, I got kicked off. Thank you, Jack. My wife is very happy that you kicked me off Twitter. So, so no one can. So that hasn't done anything bad. It helped my productivity, if anything else. The question earlier, did I create BTC? No, I created Bitcoin. BTC is a ticker symbol. Bitcoin is a protocol. So that's the distinction.
There you guys have it. Cool. Greg, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I very much thank you for being here. Everyone give another round of applause for Greg. Thanks for being here. And I wish everyone a good evening. I'm currently based in Germany. I know most of you are currently based in China. Greg is currently based in London. So everyone have a great evening, a great afternoon. And yeah, I'll look forward to see everyone back and continue discussion around NFTs, blockchain, and all the other exciting technologies out there. So thanks again, Greg, and everyone have a good evening and afternoon. Bye, guys.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.